edition of That's a Good Cup of Joe Constitutional Special Edition. So we are up to Federalist paper number 9. Now, the title of this one is pretty intriguing, I believe. It says, "The utility of the nation as a safeguard against domestic faction and insurrection." Oh, Jesus Christ. Boy, you know, I really do wish that in my younger days there was a course in public school that pretty much took us through the Federalist Papers, so that every student going through our education system would be educated on these documents. Like I said, we probably talked through, and if I could remember much, we did probably discuss the Constitution. But the granular, getting up in there into the crevices, reasoning behind the necessity of the Constitution was never explored. It's probably explored in higher education, law school and such, once you get past that. So which means that this education is primarily for educated individuals with college degrees. If you ascend to that level of intellectual indoctrination, as it may be called sometimes, then you would be privileged to this level of education because it would have been provided to you at that time. But that's just my opinion on that. Okay? So if I'm crazy or people think that, you know, my thoughts are wrong, send me a message. Let me know. You know, share it. Criticism, hey, everybody's got an opinion, right? Same as other things. Okay. So let's go. Federalist number 9. The utility of the nation as a safeguard against domestic faction and insurrection. This was in the Independent Journal, and the author is, again, Alexander Hamilton. And it goes, "To the people of the state of New York, a firm union will be of the utmost moment to the peace and liberty of the states as a barrier against domestic faction and insurrection. It is impossible to read the history of the petty republics of Greece and Italy without feeling sensations of horror and disgust at the distractions with which they were continually agitated and at the rapid succession of revolutions by which they were kept in a state of perpetual vibrations between the extremes of tyranny and anarchy. If they exhibit occasional claims, these only serve as short-lived contrast to the furious storms that are to succeed. If now and then the intervals of felicity open to view, we hold them with a mixture of regret arising from the reflection that the pleasing scenes before us are soon to be overwhelmed by the tempestuous waves of sedition and party rage. If momentary rays of glory break through from the gloom, while they dazzle us with the transient and fleeting brilliancy, they at the same time admonish us to lament that the vices of government should prevent the direction and tarnish the luster of those bright talents and exalted endowism for which the favored soils that produced them have been so justly celebrated. From the disorders that disfigure the annals of those republics, the advocates of despotism have drawn arguments not only against the forms of republican government, but against the very principles of civil liberty. They have decried all free government of inconsistent with the order of society, and have indulged themselves with malicious exultation over its friends and partisans. Happily for mankind, stupendous fabrics reared on the basis of liberty, which have flourished for ages, have in a few glorious instances refuted their gloomy sophism, and I trust America will be the broad and solid foundation of other edifices, not less magnificent, which will be equally prominent monuments of their errors. But it is not to be denied that the portraits they have shackled of Republican government sketched, let me read that again. But it is not to be denied that the portraits they have sketched for Republican government were to just copies of the original from which they were taken. If it had been found practicable to have divisive models of more perfect structure, the enlightened friends of liberty would have been obligated to abandon the cause of that species of government as indefensible. The science of politics, however, like most other sciences, have received great improvement. The efficacy of various principles is now well understood, which were either not known to all or imperfectly known to the ancients. The regular distribution of power into distinct departments, the introduction of legislative balances and checks, the institution of courts composed of judges holding their offices during good behavior, the representation of the people in the legislature by deputies of their own election, these are wholly new discoveries, or have made their principle progress towards perfection in modern times. They are means and powerful means by which the excellencies of Republican government may be retained and its imperfections lessened or avoided. To this catalog of circumstances that tend to the amelioration of popular systems of civil government, I shall venture, however novel it may appear to some, to add one more on the principle which has been made the foundation of the objection to the new Constitution. I mean the enlargement of the orbit within which such systems are to revolve, either in respect to the dimensions of a single state or to a consolidation of several smaller states into one great confederacy. The latter is that which immediately concerns the object under consideration. It will, however, be of use to examine the principle in this application of a single state, which shall be attended to in another place. The utility of a confederacy, as well to suppress faction and to guard the internal tranquility of states, as to increase their external force and security, is in reality not a new idea. It has been practiced upon in different countries and ages, and has received the sanction of the most approved writers on the subject of politics. The opponents of the plan proposed have, with great assiduity, cited and circulated the observations of Montesquieu on the necessity of a contracted territory for a republican government. But they seemed not to have been apprised of the sentiments of the great man expressed in another part of his work, nor to have adverted to the consequences of the principle to which they subscribed with such ready acquiescence. With Montesquieu recommends a small extent for republics, the standards he had in view were of the dimensions far short of the limits of almost every one of these states. Neither Virginia, Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, New York, North Carolina, nor Georgia can by any means be compared with the models from which he reasoned, and to which the terms of his description apply. If we therefore take his ideas on this point as a criterion of truth, we shall be driven to the alternative either by taking refuge at once in the arms of monarchy or splitting ourselves into infinitely of little, jealous clashes, tumultuous commonwealths, the wretched nurseries of increased discord, and the miserable objects of universal pity or contempt. Some of the writers who have come forward on the other side of the question seem to have been aware of the dilemma, and have even been bold enough to hint at the division of the larger states as a desirable thing. Such an infatuated policy, such a desperate expedient might, by the multiplication of petty offices, answer the views of men who poses not qualifications to extend their influence behind the narrow circles of personal intrigue, but it could never promote the greatness or happiness of the people, happiness of the people of America. Referring the examinations of the principle itself to another place has been already mentioned. It will be sufficient to remark here that, in the sense of the author who has been most emphatically quoted upon the occasion, it would only dictate a reduction of the size of a more considerable members of the Union, but would not militate against their being all comprehended in one Confederate government. And this is the true question in the discussion of which we are at present interested. So far are the suggestions of Montesquieu from standing in opposition of a general union of the states, that he explicitly treats the Confederate Republic as an expedient for extending the sphere of popular government and reconciling the advantages of monarchy with those of republicanism. It is very probable, he says, that mankind would have been obligated at length to live constantly under a government of a single person, had they not contrived a kind of constitution that has all the internal advantages of a republic, together with the external force of a monarchical government. I mean, a Confederate Republic. Is that what we're looking to do, Republican Party? Huh? This form of government is a convention by which several smaller states agree to become members of a larger one which they intend to form. It is a kind of assemblage of societies that constitute a new one, capable of increasing by means of new associations till they arrive to such a degree of power as to be able to provide for the security of the united body. A republic of this kind, able to withstand an external force, may support itself without any internal corruptions. The form of this society prevents all manner of inconveniencies. If a single member should attempt to usurp the supreme authority, he could not be supposed to have an equal authority and credit in all of the Confederate States. Were he to have too great of influence over one, this would alarm the rest. Were he to subdue a part which would still remain free, might oppose him with forces independent of those which he has usurped, and overpowered him before he could settle on in his usurpation. Should a popular insurrection plan happen in one of the Confederate States, the others are able to quell it. Should abuse creep into one part, they are reformed by those that remain sound. The state may be destroyed on one side, but not on the other. The Confederacy may be dissolved, and the Confederacies preserve their sovereignty. As this government is composed of small republics, it enjoys the internal happiness of each, and with respect to its external situation, it is possessed by means of an association of all the advantages of large monarchies. I have thought improper to quote at length these interesting passages, because they contain a luminous abridgment of the principal arguments in favor of the Union, and must effectually remove the false impressions which its misapplication of other parts of the work was calculated to make. They have at the same time an immediate connection with the more immediate design of this paper, which is to illustrate the tendency of the Union to repress domestic faction and insurrection. A distinction, more suitable than accurate, has been raised between the confederacies and a consolidation of the states. The essential characteristics of the first is said to be the restriction of its authority to the members in their collective capacities, without reaching to the individuals of whom they are composed. It is contended that the National Council ought to have no concern with any object of internal administration. An exact equality of suffrage between the members, who has also been insisted upon as a leading feature of the Confederate government. These positions are in the main arbitrary. They are supported neither by principle nor precedent. It has indeed happened that governments of this kind have generally operated in a manner which the distinction taken notice of supposes to be inherent in their nature, but there have been in most of them extensive exceptions to the practice which serve to prove, as far as examples will go, that there is no absolute rule on the subject, and it will be clearly shown in the course of this investigation that as far as the principle contend has prevailed, it has been the cause of the incurable disorder and imbecility in the government. The definition of a confederate republic seems simply to be an assemblage of societies or an association of two or more states into one state. The extent, modification, and objects of the federal authority are mere matters of discretion, as long as the separate organization of the members be not abolished, so long as it exists by a constitutional necessity. For local purposes, though, it should be in perfect subordination to the general authority of the Union. It would still be, in fact and in theory, an association of states or a confederacy. The proposed Constitution, so far from implying an abolition of the state governments, make them constituent parts of the national sovereignty, by allowing them a direct representation in the Senate that leaves in their possession certain exclusive and more important portions of sovereign power. This fully corresponds in every rational import of the terms with the idea of a federal government. The definition of a confederate republic seems simply to be an assemblage of societies or an association of two or more states into one state. The extent, modifications, and objects of the federal authority are mere matters of discretion, so long as the separate organization of the members be not abolished, so long as it exists by the constitutional necessity. For local purposes, though, it should be in perfect subordination to the general authority of the Union. It would still be, in fact, in theory, an association of states or a confederacy. The proposed Constitution, so far by implying an abolition of the state governments, makes them constituent parts of the national sovereignty by allowing them a direct representation in the Senate, and leaves in their possession certain exclusive and very important portions of sovereign power. This fully corresponds in every rational import of the terms with the idea of a federal government. The Lycian Confederacy, which consisted of 23 cities or republics, the largest were entitled to 3 votes in common council. Those of the middle class and 2. Let me read that again. The Lycian Confederacy, which consisted of 23 cities or republics, the largest were entitled to 3 votes in the common council. Those of the middle class to 2, and the smallest to 1. The common council had appointed of all the judges and magistrates of respective cities. This was certainly the most delicate species of interference in their internal administration, for if there be anything that seems exclusively apportioned to the local jurisdictions, it is the appointment of their own officers. Yet Montesquieu, speaking of this association, says, "Were I to give a model of an excellent confederate republic, it would be that the Lycia, thus we perceive that the distinctions insisted upon were not within the contemplation of this enlightened civilian, and we shall be led to conclude that they are the novel refinements of an erroneous theory." Wow. That's interesting. The largest were entitled to 3 votes. Middle class 2, and the smallest 1. Wow. I never knew that. That is an interesting concept. And you know what? I'm thinking that this is what leads us to our selection of our president for electoral votes. The consolidation of the voting power, though in the general election, the people will speak. And then the result of that election is consolidated in electoral votes. And to me, that develops the contention that can be had, which led to 2020's Trump loss. Because losing the states that he did, the fake electoral votes on the Republican side, in order to create conflict, which will lead to the constitutional choice of selecting the president. So in a way, this here takes votes away from people. And though the people may be voting a certain way or with a certain ideology, those within the federal aspect of the government, those with a larger portion, because if you think about it, the largest of the cities, right, were entitled to 3 votes. Now, is it by population or by stature? Because you got stature, middle class, and then you got the smallest class. Is that based on population or stature? But in any way, the thoughts of this type of ideology to guard against domestic entanglements and separations, which can lead to insurrection. That happened. That happened. This is what they were looking to guard against. People feeling marginalized. People feeling not heard, right? Creating discontent. Looking to rise against our neighbors. Very insightful things. So, we're going to continue on with the conversation. We're going to go to Federalist paper number 10, which is a continuation. And we'll take care of that when we come back. And that is today's Good Cup of Joe.